When I first heard the name Hal Huggins, I said, who? And then in dental school, I was told about this nutcase running around talking about the dangers of mercury. Hal Huggins, DDS, MS, the world's most controversial dentist forever and ever, because of his stand on trying to convince dentistry to stop the use of mercury in fillings. What a noble idea. He has practiced for years, a few. He received a postdoc master's at the University of Colorado with an emphasis on immunology and toxicity in 1990. He successfully pioneered treatments for autoimmune diseases caused by dental toxins and has personally treated over 5,000 toxic patients. If you ever have the opportunity to go to his website, is that slaying dragons that you're doing out there? If you see what he has done for our troops, the British troops, who became toxic and mercury poisoned due to vaccinations, the man doesn't stop. He has lectured professionally 2,500 days in 46 of the U.S. states, 14 foreign countries. He has authored several books, written over 50 articles, and given over 1,000 radio and television interviews, including 60 Minutes Australia, 1989, and 60 Minutes New Zealand, 2007. He is currently a consultant worldwide for multidiscipline centers and the founder of the Multidiscipline Alliance of Professionals who practice, have you ever heard of the Huggins Protocol for recovery of autoimmune diseases? It is my distinct pleasure and honor to welcome Hal Huggins here this morning.
Okay, am I turned on now? Okay. Some people would probably rather I would keep it off. There's this vicious dog down the street, and they've got an electric fence to keep him in, and I kind of feel like that's what's going on here. They said, you know, you don't walk past this, you don't walk through here, you don't, yeah. Okay. Some years ago, the figure that was left out here was that I am approaching my 50th year of practice. After 50 years, I hope I can get it right. 42 years ago, I got involved in body chemistry, and I don't know, 30-some years ago, I got involved with mercury. And I'm sure most of you know the stories there of the slings and the arrows of outrageous fortune when you start messing with your method of income. There's a radio show that I did a few months ago. It was a religious station, and the fellow said, in starting out, do you mind if I give a prayer? And I said, no, that's fine. So he gave his prayer, and he ends his prayer with a quotation from, I don't know, I think it was maybe Shakespeare. It said, know the truth and it shall set you free. Amen. I said, would you like to hear Huggins' version of that? And he said, yes, go right ahead. And I said, speak the truth and it shall set you in the crosshairs. Several people I owe thanks to. Dr. Don, I appreciate your letting me change the schedule. If you look in your book, it has all these pretty slides in it that I was supposed to be talking about, but I'm not. I got a permission to show the slides that about 20% of this information I didn't know last week. The whole slide series here was put together by Jamie starting Monday of this week, Monday and Tuesday. And a lot of the information came from Robert Wheeler in the DNA laboratory. And this has ignited a new fire in my aging body, as I have been told. But you know, there have probably been 20 people here who've come up to me and said, "My, you look good." You know, what are you expecting of me? Are you supposed to look like a cadaver? Some years ago, I was lecturing in some state way out, California, maybe you've heard of, and there were several hundred people in the audience, and afterwards everybody had some question. So that people all over the place, and there's this little guy about this big over here doing this on my shoulder. I smack him. And he says, "Give me your card. I've got something very important to send you." If I give you my card, will you leave me alone? 6 months later, I got a box without a return address on it, and I opened the box. At this time, I was taking a postdoc master's in immunology at University of Colorado, and the professors had informed me, in writing your papers, don't ever use a reference that's more than 2 years old, because it's of no significance. And I said, "Oh, does that mean there's no significance to the Bible?" Anyway, I opened up this box, and here are papers from 1910, 1920, 1930, of no significance. Close it. But I had been hearing things from people like von Harada and a bunch of others who were talking about root canals and how they mess up the meridians. I thought, what? And as it turns out, meridians are invisible electric wires that run through the body. I said, well, can you see them on X-ray? And you can't see them, but they're there. My grandfather used to tell me, when I was a little kid, he used to tell me about the guinters out there. You couldn't see them, but they were there. So you didn't go out at night because the guinters might get you. Meridians. Okay. Then somebody called and said, yeah, I took out a root canal tooth, and now the local society is all over me for it. But, you know, it's messing up the meridians. He said, do you have anything on root canals? No, I don't. Well, I just got this box. I don't know what's in it, but there's a book on root canals. Why don't I check this out? Well, I did check it out. This box had been sent to me by a man named Dale. And it took a while because there was no return address. I finally found the guy, and I said, what's this box of old papers? And he said, you know Weston Price? I said, no. And he said, Weston Price, in about 1947, was on his deathbed, and he called me to him. And he said, I feel I really did a good job on nutrition, but I did not get the point across on root canals, as hard as I tried for 35 years. That's my steamer trunk over there. And it is full of papers that are from me. I guess I'm a sensitive person. If I weren't, I probably couldn't do the things I do. I thought I could get through this. I've told it before. But it is rather emotional. Because Price had said, I did not get the point across. See if you can find somebody who can be stimulated to carry on my work with root canals and give them this box. They'll know what to do with it. 40 years later, it was given to me. The Dead Sea Scrolls of Dentistry. I opened a book by Weston Price, and in 3 pages, it changed my life again. A course correction. At that time, by my own modest admission, I was pretty good at doing root canals. Not too many people here know that I used to teach a course called the 8-Minute Alloy, how to do 6-handed dentistry and placing amalgams. I don't usually admit that too often. So I've got a colored, checkered, I've got an interesting past. But yes, I did read that material. I never did another root canal. Why? It took me about 15 years before I could add 1 sentence to what Weston Price did in his research. Research that Boyd Haley looked at and said, there's no way this could be duplicated today. And that's true. But we have found a way to go a step further, finally, improving and finding ways to protect you. There are people who want to remove root canal teeth to protect their patients. If you have this information, I don't think you have to worry about the powers coming to you saying, you took out a perfectly healthy root canal tooth. There's no such thing as a perfectly healthy root canal tooth. That's an oxymoron. Big statement, challenging to a lot of people in this room, though this is my favorite room to present this. I asked Dawn if I could present this because this is the first time we've made a major presentation on this, and I appreciate you. So, advance to the rear. What does that mean? That means that we owe a lot to the people in our past that we have stood upon the shoulders of. Without our parents, we wouldn't be here. Without our grandparents, without our ancestors, without the people who developed the mind from the caveman to where we are now, each generation does something to improve, except for one part. There's this thing called a telomere. There's this thing called a telomere. What is this? This is your original DNA, your mitochondrial Eve. Where did we come from? At one time, we had the potential to live to be 1,000 years old, as was proved by Methuselah and my father. He was close to that. But through the ages, things have happened that have reduced our DNA. And there is one way in which we are reducing that today. I would like to see that altered. Advance to the rear. Where did we come from? Okay, if we go back 100 years, we were riding around in wagons like this, except for Weston Price, who was riding in something like that, because he was a century ahead of his time. Okay, if we look back, in 1900, a 90-year-old man was a really old man. And in the year 2000, 2011, a 90-year-old man is still a really old man. As an aside, do you mind a little political thing? Jamie is looking into the computer, something I don't know anything about, but you know, she puts in things like old man with wrinkles, and up comes a picture of Barack Obama. what he looked like 4 years ago and what he looks like now. He looks like a 90-year-old man. So how much have we advanced there? Well, if we look back in 1899, in the Journal of the American Medical Association, there were 2 articles concerning heart disease. In 1900, there were 0 articles on heart disease. In 1901, there was 1 article on heart disease. And yet by 1920, Weston Price expressed concerns about heart disease because it was approaching 10% of the population. Where did it come from? How come it was growing so fast? Today, heart disease accounts for over 25% of the deaths. I have a friend who is a forensic pathologist, coroner in Colorado Springs, and he said, as modern as things are today, still 25% of the death certificates I sign say cause of death unknown. I think maybe we can find some of those causes of death. Here are some of the advances that we have made in the last century. In 1904, Crohn's disease appeared. Alzheimer's in 1906, Parkinson's, Sjogren's, autism, lupus, AIDS. These are all new diseases. I spent 4 years taking a postdoc in immunology. And to me, immunology is like the ocean. If the ocean were to drop 10 feet, 20 feet, there would be islands appear that are not there today. Our immune system is dropping every year. And new diseases like these are beginning to appear. What kind of advances are we making? Well, Abraham Lincoln was a very happy man until he got his amalgams placed. And then, as we know him, he was a very depressed individual. Depression is one of the things you catch from mercury. So we have gone from amalgam to the high copper amalgam. We have gone from there to the composite. Gold is getting to be expensive as it did back in the 70s. And so they came up with a nickel crown. Well, you know, a nickel's worth of nickel will cover a whole tooth. And they're very hard. From extractions, we've gone to root canals, to implants, to bone grafts. We have gone from partial dentures to implants. It is amazing to me how many times each week on the telephone people call and say, well, if I have a tooth removed, do I have to go the rest of my life without a tooth there? I mean, what am I going to chew with? I'm going to look ugly. I didn't hear that 50 years ago. 50 years ago, people said, well, I'm going to have a tooth out, so I guess I need a partial. I need a removable bridge. I need a fixed bridge. My comment today is dentists specialize in filling up holes. You don't have to worry. You will be beautiful. You will be able to chew. We have gone from brushing to flossing to deep scales. And now there is one that is very popular in Florida. And that's where you take a solution of antibiotic and you go around the tooth in the gingival crevice and you inject a liquid solution of antibiotic. And in this one office I know of, it is $89 per tooth. So we're talking $600, $700, $800 to squirt antibiotic in the gingival crevice to cure periodontal disease. I have come up with a technique that's not real popular because it costs less than 1.3 cents, and it does a better job and lasts longer. If you can't make money at it, it's not popular. Butter. I remember as a child, my grandmother going to the ice box and getting out this white stuff that had a yellow. Anybody here know what I'm talking about? You know, I was told that I would probably be the oldest person in this room. Is Ron Underdale here? Thank you, Ron. He's older than I am. But you pop this yellow thing, and then you squeeze it around until this white mess becomes yellow, and it looks like butter. Doesn't taste exactly like it, but, you know, it's close enough. I remember my grandfather getting very upset about that. He was a farmer. He raised cattle, too. And I can remember grandmother taking it off, and my mother saying, "But it is frozen solid." And she said, "That'll keep him in the chair for an hour." So yes, it took me an hour to massage that and turn it into margarine. Salt. Salt is dangerous. Wait a minute. We used to say, "Are you worth your salt?" Where does the word come from? S-A-L comes from salary. Because in Roman times, half of your salary was gold, half of your salary was salt, because the soldiers did not perform well unless they had a lot of salt in their body. But today we've gone to light salt, which is potassium chloride, and if you want to mess up your sodium potassium levels in the blood, just take the potassium chloride and make sure that your affairs are in order. Or we want the type that you carry under your arm with an umbrella that rains when it pours, or pours when it rains, whatever it does. Anyway, this salt, why does it pour when it rains? Because it has aluminum in it. Plant aluminum in your brain, mentally. We'll talk about that later. Then we get on to sea salt. We have an extensive program that I'm very pleased with because it reverses a lot of the, quote, incurable diseases unless that patient continues to eat sea salt. If they do everything I tell them, but they eat sea salt, they're not going to get well. Advance to the rear. Go to the low-fat diet. If there were no fat in the food, you would not eat it, you would spit it out. So we have to compensate for the low fat by putting in excitotoxins. These are chemicals that make your tongue and make your nervous system think that things taste good while it's killing your nervous system. It's interesting to me that in the airlines, when I have my suitcase, and if it arrives the same place I do at home, it says COS, which stands for Colorado Springs. But there is a fellow who has come up with some of the same inventions that I've come up with, only he came up with them 3,000 years earlier than I did, and he lived in COS, C-O-S, which was in someplace in Europe, same place that Nikola Tesla came from, someplace over there. He used homeopathy. No, he used increasing the body's resistance to disease. That was Hippocrates' idea of medicine. Then we went to homeopathy, and now we're into miracle drugs, antibiotics. We used to have corn. Now 80% of the corn that we eat is genetically modified. And just over the last 2 weeks, I have found out what genetically modified corn does. We have somebody in the laboratory whose name is tweak. He drives me up a wall. Hey, you got 95% on this. Yeah, I just need to tweak it a little more. Maybe I can get to 97. If I tweak it a little more, I can tweak, tweak, tweak. So he's developed this system where you can draw blood and tell, do you have the chemical in your blood that's called Bacillus
subtilis? Serious? Thioregenesis? BT? BT? Yeah.
Yeah, it's called Bacillus.
Thioregenesis?
That's what I said. Yeah. Yeah, it's in my blood. I have eaten genetically altered corn. I didn't know I was doing that. I just found out last week in Pennsylvania what that stuff does to animals. Is it going to do that to people? I'll clue you, it is doing that to people. And it is not good. And if you had an injury, Mama kissed the boo-boo, and now we use antibiotic creams. We are now in the 20th, 21st, 22nd, I don't know. I've had a hard time getting into the 20th century as computers and so on. But I did learn that in the 20th century, this was the century of autoimmune disease. They didn't have autoimmune diseases when I was a kid, and now they're very, very popular. What is an autoimmune disease? Oh, that's where it's a disease in which your body is attacking yourself. So what we have to do is kill the immune system because it's killing your own cells. What's really going on here? From the world of immunology, you find that you have a cell in your body. And if you have a cell in your body, it's called self. And if there's something in there that doesn't belong there, it's called non-self. Those are good names, easy to figure out. But if you have a self cell,
don't cross the line. Don't do it.
is this turned on? Oh yeah, it's turned on. Okay, we have a self cell. What if we have a mercury filling and the mercury comes out of the filling and goes around and finds a position on the cell membrane and it parks here? Then we have a non-self cell. Now, our cells have a license plate on them called the major histocompatibility complex. MHC, fortunately. And this MHC is the recognition system for the immune system. A self cell has an MHC. A non-self has an MHC plus an atom of mercury. Now, if you have a splinter, now who in my office do you suppose volunteered to do this? I've got some really neat people working for me. But the immune system sees this that has gotten into the body where it does not belong. There is no major histocompatibility complex on a splinter. This is non-self. Now, the job description for the immune system is if there is non-self, get rid of it, kill it, remove it. So the immune system is doing its job description. Now today dentistry controls that job market because dentistry adds things from root canals and cavitations, amalgams, and nickel that create a non-self condition in our bodies. Now, you may or may not be familiar with some of the symbols like Cu. There's no U here. All right, Cu is for copper. There's nickel. How'd that get in there? Okay, and aluminum. These are things that will bind to the cell membrane, creating a non-self condition in one of your self cells. So the immune system is signaled to get rid of it. It is doing its job description. Now, I spent 4 years with the immune system, and I'm in love with it. A patient comes in to me with an autoimmune disease. Hey, you're messing with family. You leave the immune system alone. Maybe your immune system, it's my immune system too. I don't like people killing off the immune system, and yet this is the treatment for autoimmune disease. If you apply that to the armed forces today, I'll tell you how we can stop the war in Iraq immediately. And that would be kill all the American soldiers. The war would be over. That is the theory that is used in medicine today, in killing the immune system because it is doing its job description of getting rid of stuff that shouldn't be there. Now, if you have something in your body, it's you, it is self. But if you do something like a root canal, you have lost your MHC. You have lost your license plate. This is no longer you. If it has a mercury filling in it, it is Jamie M for Mercury instead of Jamie. This is void, therefore the immune system should destroy. So when you have a foreign object in the body, like a root canal tooth becomes or an abscess tooth becomes, the immune system must, if it's healthy, get rid of it. And here's kind of an interesting point. If you have a healthy body, it will reject a root canal tooth. I've done a lot of root canals, and I know some of them were successful and some of them weren't. That's upside down and backwards. Because the ones that were successful, what's success? By definition of the Dental Association, no pain. If there's no pain in a root canal tooth, that's because there's no confinement around it by the immune system. And so the bacteria and the toxins are going all over the body. The body gets the brunt of it. The tooth feels fine. But if you have a good immune system, it tries to get rid of non-self, and in doing so, that tooth will become infected. There'll be pus around it. There is pain around it. You give antibiotics that kill the immune system in that area. And that's why the pain goes away. You have interfered with your immune system. This is not the way to practice medicine. There's this rumor going around about me. You may have heard it, may not. It's rumored that I'm opinionated. Well, I'm opinionated from 50 years of looking at stuff like this and dealing with people who are dealing with their own death, even if they are up in years, you know, like 35, now 25. Younger and younger people are getting sicker and sicker with autoimmune diseases. And you look in their mouth, if you know what to look for, you can find the origins. Then there is my real concern. This is the thing that probably bothers me emotionally, spiritually, more than anything else. We have all heard of DNA. And some of us who were able to stay awake in class heard of RNA. DNA is our original blueprint. It stays in the safe. Now, we don't mess with it a whole lot. What we are is primarily the result of RNA. RNA is a photocopy. It's a Xerox of the DNA. And it runs around saying, okay, we need some protein, and RNA will tell you how to do it. Here is the map of what to do. If we do something like drugs, like heavy metals, alcohol, any of these things that are not particularly good for us, we disturb the RNA and we become ill. Our body is the result of what we did to our body here. So we get what we ask for. We pay the price. But if we get something in there that can alter DNA and RNA, like mercury, like nickel, like copper, like the toxins from root canals and cavitations, and that touches the DNA, that does damage to the DNA, and if it happens to be in a germ cell, that's forever. Your lineage, children, grandchildren, and so on, until your lineage stops, is going to contain that injury to your DNA. And as many people as who have amalgam in their mouth today, as many people who have gone through chrome crowns and braces, as many people who have had root canals, as I understand it, there is now a quota, is that the right word? 30 million root canals a year, which was accomplished in 1999, so now it's been moved to 40 million root canals a year, to 60 million root canals a year, of which we are accomplishing 40 million. I've got some interesting stories on how people got root canals. Not the same way I used to diagnose when I did root canals, but at that time we did not have a quota either. Do we have a right to mess with DNA? Our telomere does not last 1,000 years anymore. It's down to 72. Oh my. Tell Boyd, is Boyd Haley in here? Tell Boyd about that. He's 71. He better watch out. 72's coming up. I don't have to worry. I passed over that one. But that's one of the advantages of being deaf. Whatever that was, I didn't hear it. And where did I develop my deafness? In the dental office, having mercury splashed up in my ears, cutting those little villi down till now I can see lips moving. Yeah, her lips are moving. Oh. Yeah, well, I will very soon approach the equinox where my 50th year in practice and my 75th year on the planet are going to be within a few weeks of each other. So send me a Christmas card. Thank you. But it bothers me that as in dentistry, we can hold the future of the race, the human race, in our hands with that drill, with that thumb that places in the amalgam, with the nickel crowns, with the root canals, with the cavitations, because our association tells us, leave the placenta in. Placenta? Yeah. Where you have a tooth, you remove it, the periodontal ligament is supposed to be left in. That's the equivalent of leaving the placenta in after delivering a baby. And it is going to give problems. I could talk for a lot longer than we have here about the problems from leaving the ligament in. But you know, we are segmented. We have been taught in segments. In dentistry, we learn about amalgam. We learn about root canals. We learn about implants, while our medical colleagues are learning about geriatrics, orthopedics, respiratory disease. And if you take pathology from either one of the classes, you learn about heart disease, meningitis, pneumonia. And then down the hall, there's another place that above the door, it says microbiology. And whoever came up with the names in there, I hope there is a warm place for him. There was a real long one. It begins with A, and over here it has another A. And I looked at that one time. It was severely criticized because I called it supercalifragilisticexpial. And the real name of it, Carolyn, is... Very good. Give her a hand. All right. But what I didn't know until the last few years is we should be connecting the dots. If we can connect the dots, we can find out a whole new brand of disease, a whole new way to look at it, which gives us a whole new way to treat it. Because there is a relationship between amalgam and how it makes the Prevotella denticola, which is owned by one of the bottling companies, to create heart disease. That root canals contain gamella, which gives you meningitis, which should be over here under the medical column. And implants contain Klebsiella, which is a really bad actor, which can give you pneumonia, which should go over here. Why don't we put everybody together? If we're going to get away from what Boyd was talking about yesterday with the being country number 41 in health, if we're going to climb up to 35, we're going to have to connect the dots. We're going to have to see these connections. When I was in school, we had one microbe, like measles, poliovirus, corynebacterium, and what did the measles virus give you? It gave you measles. Yeah, what does the poliovirus give you? Yeah, polio. What does the corynebacterium give you? Diphtheria. It's a one-on-one, one microbe for one disease. That's not what we have anymore. We came out with miracle drugs, and the bacteria are smarter than we are. Now that is hard to believe unless you've tried to fix an incurable disease. You get a bacterial infection, and it's not easy to correct because the bacteria get together as groups. You have groups of bacteria that go beyond their own family. They didn't used to do that. But now they bring in other members of other families so they can work together. So if they have a hard time bringing the body down, you take the heart, I'll take the lungs, you take the muscles, and you take this, and now all together, let's go attack that body. And gene deletion, we are doing that. We, being dentists, are creating gene deletions. We're already working with a short telomere, and then if we get exposed to mercury, in 1909 they started placing amalgams in blacks. When I was a kid, they were Negroes. Today they're black. I don't know. Look same color to me. And in 1910, the next year, we started seeing an outbreak of sickle cell anemia. How many genes had to be deleted to come up with sickle cell anemia? 1. It only took 1 gene deletion out of a bazillion genes that we've got in there. You knock out 1 and we have an incurable disease that is totally preventable if you don't go putting nickel, chrome crowns, or as they're saying in California. I appreciate the work you gals are doing out in California, getting cities, whole cities, to ban the use of mercury, suggesting we ban the use of mercury. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And what's dentistry's excuse? We have to have amalgam for the low-income people. This is a good excuse. Do you know what happens if you're a dentist like some of the people in here and you come up and say, I think we should stop using amalgam? The threats are already there, and we have these in emails and we have them in ear mails, whatever you can hear. You stand up and you speak out against amalgam, and you will not practice dentistry in any of the 50 states, and you will be invited to leave the state of California. Every dentist that I ever shook hands with in the state of Colorado no longer practices in Colorado. Not everyone, but the majority of them have been chased out by that threat. This is the health profession that is our parent. To a certain extent, they don't have the control over me by threats and intimidation that they used to. But still, they carry it farther than that. Some of you know that my former wife is my former wife because in an effort to kill me, they missed and got her. And they said she would not live through the night. But she did, because she had a high enough cholesterol to fight it off. And then she said, you're a nice guy, but you're dangerous to live around. So that was 15 years ago. She had a daughter who lived with us. We were all 3 radiated in my home. We all 3 had to have cataract surgery. Children should not have to have cataract surgery. She shouldn't have had to have it. I shouldn't have. Well, I should have. I was the one who was stirring the pot. But it's a real strange kind of cataract that comes only from a real weird radiation. And there was one man with a soul who called me and would not give his name. But he said, I am getting out of this organization, an organization that everybody here has heard of for years, because someday I'm going to face St. Peter, and I know what I've done to people like you. I'm gone. But I want you to know that what's happened to you is not by accident. It's by plan. So you are brave souls, and probably brave because you don't know the power of our parent organization. So I appreciate what you are doing. But you will not have to put up with what I put up with. And if you guys get down there in Nairobi at the end of this month, isn't it? And we get dentistry at the top of the list for creating mercury toxicity, and mercury worldwide becomes banned, you won't have to worry about it. You will be protected. Gene additions. This is another thing that the bacteria can do. They look around, they find an old dinosaur DNA, and they take it and put it on the end of their heel, just like some women I know who are 5'2" and end up being 6'2" because of their high heels. Gene additions do not create healthy people, but they create bacteria that keep us from being healthy gene combinations. If this doesn't work, hey, let me take some of my DNA and it's yours for the asking. So these bacteria are getting stronger every day. Antibiotic resistance is something that was caused by dentistry. The bacteria were about to die from the mercury, and so they created a combination, addition, deletion. They created something within themselves to convert the mercury into methyl mercury. The methyl mercury was light and would come up and go out of the bacterial cell, may contaminate the host, but the bacteria lives. Simultaneously, when the bacteria became resistant to mercury, it became antibiotic resistant. So we in dentistry created that also. We created the Antibiotic of the Month Club. Because these guys, Bob has a real interesting slide that shows how the bacteria share their new genes with each other. This is kind of this long tube that goes down and penetrates into another cell, and I guess it kind of has implications. It works. It gives a lot of people antibiotic resistance. And of course, if we develop new genes, we can develop new diseases. And you just saw a list, partial list of the new diseases. Gene transference. Destroy the immune system. Hey, all we have to do is wipe out the lymphocytes, because the lymphocytes place the flags on the cells that need to be destroyed. And then we need the PMNs, the monocytes, eosinophils, the basophils. We don't need any of that if we can just kill off the lymphocytes, in particular the T lymphocytes. Kill those off, and hey, the rest of them don't have a leader anymore. So there are a bunch of bacteria that we found in, where was it? In root canals that can do this. So one of the primary responsibilities of these 4 bacteria is to wipe out the immune system. Well, disease used to be a microbe and a susceptible human being. Not that way anymore, because we now have the marriage between metals and microbes. The microbes, they used to produce disease by themselves. And now, with the help of heavy metals, the ones we find in dentistry, the microbes now produce more toxins. A microbe can produce as many as 5 different toxins, which can attack 5 different organs in the body from one bug, if it is stimulated by copper, by mercury, by aluminum, by the common things that are used in dentistry today. So there is an unholy matrimony, an unwelcome wedding here between microbes and metals, both of dental origin. Copper causes gene expression. Now here's one that I've finally learned how to pronounce. Don't correct me if I'm wrong. It's Ochobacter. Well, I had a good start. Ochobactrum anthropi. When I first saw this, being of Southern heritage, I called it okra and apple pie. Ochobacterium and anthropi is a toxin that is expressed from gene activation. Well, who's going to activate the genes? Copper activates the genes. Copper from the high copper amalgam. Now, in this slide, all right, this that we see here is the toxin itself. We got a little well up here, and this is all done by electrophoretic separation. You got a charge up here and a charge up here, and it makes things migrate. And they're going to stop at a specific molecular weight. And the control is not on this. We do need to improve this slide. Like I said, this is brand new material, and I've noticed that we do have the control on one of the slides, but not here. The control looks just like this, meaning that here is a spike of that bacteria. Now, why am I interested in that bacteria? Because in the literature, it says that this is a very rare bacteria. Don't bother looking for it because you're never going to find it. Well, that's some kind of challenge. Where do I have the most trouble? Which disease gives me the most trouble? Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. So I looked. What are the chances of finding okra and apple pie the first time? 1 in a million. With the first ALS patient, I found it. Hey, wouldn't you know, there's that bait, and I was hooked. So I looked at another ALS patient for this rare bacterium. There are only 54 articles worldwide ever written on this, and 50 of them are repeats of the first 4. So there's not a whole lot known about it, but some funny things. It'll increase the pulse while decreasing the blood pressure. That doesn't sound right, but it does it. So that's kind of a characteristic that we find in ALS, or I mean in Ochrebacterium anthropi. Is there a relation? So he looked for a second. The chances are 1 in a billion that we would find 2. We found it. The third, we found it. A fourth, we found it. This is so rare that we found 14 out of 14 had this bacterium. This very rare bacterium. Is there a possibility that there's a connection between this and Lou Gehrig's disease? How do you get it anyway? If you add copper at 1 part per million, you get the formation of a toxin that comes from anthropi. Okay, number 2 was 1 part per billion. And what do we have? Equal intensity of that toxin. But the bacterium produces 4 different toxins. This is just one of them. What happens if we go on to 1 part per trillion? What happens if we go to 1 part per quadrillion of copper? We get the same activity that we do at 1 part per million. Where are we getting all of this copper? When I was in dental school in the 50s, dentistry had banned copper amalgam because it had 20% copper in it. It was banned, so they gave it to the dental students. And we used it to pack these little dies onto which we did. Is anybody here old enough to have had the course called Stacking BBs? Nobody's that old. What do you don't want to know. Well, it's been a quantum leap since then, yes, because that's how you make porcelain. You take these little tiny beads of porcelain and you stack them up here and you put them in the oven, and just as it's going in the oven, they all fall off. So it was quite a trick to stack BBs and make your porcelain on that copper amalgam die. So that's what copper amalgam was good for, but it was banned because it was too toxic. There's way too much copper in it, 20%. You're going to kill people. And today, We are getting exposures to copper 24/7 because the copper amalgam contains 28 to 33% copper and 50% mercury, and as was shown by Dag Brun in Metal Release from Dental Biomarkers in the Biomaterials Journal, the high copper amalgam yields now, I take some credit for this because the high copper amalgam was invented to shut up Huggins because no mercury would come out of a high copper amalgam. Well, obviously these people, not being dentists, had never had chemistry either or electrochemistry, and didn't realize when you mix these metals together you create an enormous amount of electrical current. But according to Brun, the high copper amalgam yields 50 times more copper and more mercury than the conventional amalgam. So what did they do for this? They labeled it state of the art. And who came up with this? The 2 patents for high copper amalgam are assigned to the American Dental Association Health Foundation. Now the ADA claims we don't own the patents. No, they don't. It's their foundation that owns the patents. Did you see what she wants?
Go ahead. I'm confused. If it was banned, how could it still be in the amalgam? You're saying it was banned.
You obviously don't understand the politics of dentistry. Because they said so. What the ADA is, who is they. But not to worry, but to quote the ADA, they say, yes, it is true that mercury is highly toxic. It's the most poisonous thing on the earth that's not radioactive. However, ready for this? Direct quote. In the mouth, its toxic properties are rendered harmless. I told this to my professors at the University of Colorado. They were somewhat stunned. And one of them said, oh, they must have discovered alchemy. All right, let's look around. Who's popular? Candida albicans, that's very popular. And people want to get rid of it, and so they go on the Candida diet. They take, what is it, diflucan, the carcinogenic producing. There's a little black box around it that says don't use this except as a last resort because it's highly carcinogenic. And so, lots of people take it for that reason. Candida albicans, as it turns out, hey, it's one of our friends. Because it's a demethylator. Why do people get sick when they go on those diets, when they take those drugs? Because we are forming methyl mercury in our body continually. And we take things to stimulate that, like vitamin B12. Oh, have I received flack for saying that? But that was in my master's thesis. 88 universities had published on the methylation of mercury by vitamin B12. And so I looked into it to find out where that happens, and it happens someplace between 12 micrograms and 20 micrograms a day. The body only needs 5. Where do you get B12? Well, you get it in a bite of meat. One bite of meat has 125 micrograms of B12 in it. So you eat a whole steak, you're going to really get contaminated with B12, right? No. Because it's in a natural form. All of these supplements are either cyanocobalamin. Oh, that's too bad. I use the modern stuff, the hydroxycobalamin. Oh, well, that does the same thing. Oh, well, I use methcobalamin because it would be nice to the body. No, it does the same thing because they are all artificial. They are not natural forms. If you take the natural form, you do not get overdosed on it. And needing 5 micrograms, Why is it that in a health food store the other day I saw an advertisement for B12 at 5,000 micrograms per tablet? Take a couple or three a day. It'll give you energy. It doesn't give you energy. A few people will feel it. They put B12 in IV vitamin C, and the patient collapses. I said, well, it's die-off. They've got all kinds of excuses. It's methylation of the mercury. Methyl mercury is 100 times more toxic than the inorganic form, the vapor form. So Candida demethylates mercury, and the bacteria in the gut and the stomach will methylate it. And then Candida suddenly turns from a yeast into a fungus. Now we have something that's potentially carcinogenic. Now we have something that is dangerous. It is not protecting us like the yeast form did. What makes it change from a yeast to a fungus? Is it possible that mercury does that copper does that? And then we have the new kid on the block, gluten intolerance. Well, bread is supposed to be the staff of life. It said that in some book I was reading. But is it really there as an origin? Is Dr. Tom Levy in here? Would you please identify yourself? Or maybe he fell asleep. He what?
He's next door. It's in the next room.
He's in the exhibition hall.
I always knew he was an exhibitionist. I don't know, I'm telling a story about him. If he's not here, he won't beat me up because he won't know I said it. But we can have a laugh at his expense. Yeah, I told Tom, Tom worked for me for 3 years as a cardiologist in my facility because he had a little heart problem that as a board-certified cardiologist he couldn't take care of. You can imagine the consternation of having to go to a dentist for a problem that you're... We became friends, colleagues. I don't know. I like Tom, but this is the way Tom behaves toward his friends. I told Tom one time, I said, I can type 80 words a minute. I'm good at typing, but some mornings I get up and I start typing and I'm making 80 mistakes a minute. And some days I can type all right. And I finally figured out it's when I have breakfast before I type, and if I eat any kind of wheat, then everything goes south. I said, my IQ drops 20 points. He said, is that right? I had no idea they could measure IQ in the single digits. Why is it that I didn't have a sensitivity to gluten until I was 70 years old? Why is it that I have a pretty high sensitivity to it now? Is this something that mercury over a period of years finally breaks? That's a question that I've got. Are these gene deletions? Are they brought about by copper, mercury, aluminum, nickel? Well, if we look at gluten intolerance, we have an HLA antigen here. If this shows up, this is the control. It shows you the molecular weight you're looking for. So if this is in the same line as this, this is the one you're looking for. If this shows up, any one of these actually four, then you are gluten intolerant. But if there are none in here, the absence of the HLA indicates that you have a tolerance to gluten. But is this something that is under the control of dentistry? Good question. Don't know the answer. What else can gene deletion do? Well, let's look at chromosome 22. This is something that should be very important to us who, well, I say us, who practice dentistry. I don't really practice dentistry, do I? But in chromosome 22, mercury in particular causes massive gene deletion. Gene deletion is kind of where my thinking is going now, because these can lead to neurological diseases if it is in chromosome 22. There's one little section in there, just a little tiny section, only contains a few million base pairs in there. But in particular, if mercury has deleted some of that chromosome 22, here's where you find ALS, MS, and a few other neurological diseases. That's kind of serious if you are a dentist, because you're getting exposed to mercury every time you wind that high speed up to 125,000 and touch an amalgam. The possibility is the next atom is going to hit that chromosome 22, and you're going to be susceptible to this. When I was 35, I had multiple sclerosis, and I've been criticized for saying that because I do not have an MRI to prove it. Well, MRIs were not invented until 10 years after I came down with MS. That's the primary reason I don't have an MRI. But I had no use of my left leg at all. I was on crutches or in a wheelchair. But I could not use a walker like that because I had no function over there whatsoever. And then I discovered something that brought the use of that leg back in 6 minutes. After being on those Canadian crutches for 6 months, I remember that. That had an impact. That may be why people told me you should write a book on multiple sclerosis. I said, when I have seen 1,000 patients, I'll write a book on it. That's why in 2002 I wrote a book, Solving the MS Mystery, because I had seen my 1,000th patient. I've seen a few more since then. But yes, mercury alone, by gene deletion on chromosome 22, can give you MS. ALS is a new disease. When I was a kid, I was proud of the name Lou Gehrig because my cousin, Miller Huggins, was the manager of the New York Yankees, in which he managed Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. So, I grew up being a Yankees fan. I didn't know anybody else played baseball. But to me, first 10, 20 years in practice, Lou Gehrig was my favorite ball player alongside of Babe Ruth. And now, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, we would get, as many as one call every 6 months asking and inquiring for information on ALS and its potential relationship to dentistry. Today, we will get 2 to 3 telephone calls every day. ALS is now growing faster than multiple sclerosis. Now, the slide on MS is not in this, is it? So I'll tell you about it. In 1970, 71, 2, 3, 4, 5, we had an average of 8,800 new cases of multiple sclerosis every year. In 1976, that went from 8,800 to 123,000 new cases in 1 year. Anybody see that on the front page of the newspaper, in Time magazine, in Newsweek? Is it significant? that as many people came down with Lou Gehrig's disease in one, or multiple sclerosis in 1 year, as were probably killed in the whole Second World War. Why? That's the year that we came out with a high copper amalgam that produces 50 times more mercury, 50 times more copper. So if there's a root canal, if there's a cavitation, or if there's just mercury, mercury alone can mess with the immune system. Well, what does a chromosome 22 deletion look like? Here's chromosome 22. What if it's not there? If you are a dentist and you are missing chromosome 22 here, you are in the crosshairs. My feeling is that if you are a student thinking of going into dentistry, if you got a chromosome 22 deletion, find some other area to go into. This is not for you. But there is plenty of mercury in fish. The fillings, of course, give you 24/7 exposure. So let's watch this if we're in dentistry. If you are a dentist, it would be well to find out about your chromosome 22 and maybe specialize in cavitation removal, maybe specialize in orthodontics, in prosthodontics, making dentures. You don't have to get away from dentistry, but you do have to protect yourself. And after the break, we'll tell you a little bit about protecting yourself.
You've got time to go over that, this one. You got time to hit this one, because that'll lead to the next one after the break.
That's right. I don't want to do that.
You don't want to do it? Okay.
I don't want to do that. No. Okay. All right. All right, so let us take our break now, and we'll come back, and I'll see if I can scare you some more.